holding a disproportionately sized gun between your legs whilst mowing down hordes of aliens might sound like one of Donald Trump's dreams. In actuality, it's just Serious Sam VR. It seems wave shooters are the go-to format for new VR developers. A deathly fear of using artificial locomotion or even teleportation, combined with budgetary constraints, appears to have locked us in this weird 90s Hollywood VR that looks shiny and fancy, but then also uses game mechanics from the 1970s. And the VR version of Serious Sam is no exception. When playing the game, especially if you're a fan of the original ones, you can't help but feel somewhat teased by the fact that whilst it looks incredible and is still really fun to play, the lack of movement simply removes many of the gameplay aspects and depth that made the original non-VR games so enjoyable. Deleting our knowledge of the previous Serious Sam games and stuffing that thought into the back of my head, regardless of the lack of movement, you have to give credit to Crow Team for doing the best they possibly could have done when it comes to this sort of VR 3D Galaga game. And if you're a fan of the late 90s arcade light gun game, Serious Sam VR will probably really appeal to you. And that's because the core of the gameplay revolves around having good aim, shooting the enemies in the correct order, and selecting the correct weapons to dispatch the given types of enemy at hand.
All that sand was getting to me. Figured I'd take a break in the shade. Looks like Mental's guys had the same idea.
At times, just like arcade shooters, Serious Sam VR can be very frustrating, and the game certainly requires a lot of trial and error. In terms of the difficulty and the frustration, it will entirely depend on the difficulty setting that you play the levels at. On easy, it's like having a picnic in the park with your grandparents, but if you put things on the hardest setting, it's akin to bungee jumping off the Grand Canyon without a bungee rope and expecting not to break any bones. Somewhat unfortunately from my perspective as someone that enjoys aiming individual shots and precisely shooting people and getting the satisfaction from that, a lot of the difficulty in Serious Sam is just from the sheer number of enemies and the different angles that they come at. This then turns the game into more of a management game in terms of not using up all your ammunition and picking up the right kind of spammy weapons at the start of the stage rather than falling back on your raw accuracy and aim skill. In short, I think if you were expecting Serious Sam from Serious Sam VR, you'd probably be a little bit disappointed. If on the other hand you don't have any expectations and you just wanted a really solid 3D 90s style light gun game, then you'll probably really enjoy it. Graphically, Serious Sam looks really nice. The lighting, the textures, and the overall presentation is simply pleasing to look at and interact with. In some cases, I think some of the characters can be a bit hard to make out, especially if you're not running with super sampling. Those of us with faster computers that are running at 1.5 super sampling though won't have any issues with this at all. But really, of most importance and where Crow Team have completely nailed the graphics and pushed things to a new level is in the quality of the floor textures. Go and stick your head on the floor and look at the floor textures in this game. They're some of the best floor textures I've ever borne witness to in VR or 2D games. It's truly the next level of floor textures. Slowly moving our head away from the amazing floor textures to listen to the sounds, the sound design in the game is really quite nice when it comes to all the different weapons, the different bad guys, the environments and the music. It's all nice and immersive, but it does suffer in one regard, and that's the real lack of strong positional 3D audio. Now they have made up for this in terms of gameplay by placing HUD elements that alert you to enemies that you're not currently looking at, so you don't really feel cheated by not having this 3D positional sound. But I definitely think the game would be way more immersive and also build a lot more tension if you could more easily as a player position enemies in the game environment from the sound alone rather than relying more on the visuals. Lastly, in terms of performance, despite Serious Sam VR being somewhat of a visual feast, the game runs and performs remarkably well, and even those with minimum spec PCs should be able to run this at the required 90 FPS without issue. On our i7 GTX 1070 system, we were even able to pump the render to pixel value up to 1.5, along with all the game settings on full, which not only helped make things look nice and crisp, but also made, as we said earlier, identifying some of the more distant enemies much easier. But most importantly, the higher graphics really do let you admire those incredible, awesome floor textures. Serious Sam VR is still in early access, and as it is, you only get access to 2 worlds, though each world does have quite a few stages, and they are pretty damn difficult to beat on the hardest setting. In conclusion, I can't help but go back to the recesses of my small mammalian brain and recover the fact that this doesn't have movement and really is not a Serious Sam game. A really good 90s style VR shooter in VR, it is, and it is really fun, but it's not Serious Sam. It is just not. And the more I play it, the more I can't help but think, imagine if they just did the original Serious Sam series of games, but with the weapon implementation they've got here, some teleportation system, or even maybe the onwards movement system. I could keep dreaming, but for now it's a really fantastic shooter. In terms of recommending if you should get this, what I would say is wait for it to come out of early access so that it's got all the planets available to unlock in the game, and then you'll be able to blitz through it, experiencing that real, true 90s arcade light gun experience, but in the magical world of virtual reality. I really hope this review and introduction to Serious Sam was informative and mildly entertaining. If it was, please do click the subscribe button and like it, and also check out the rest of the videos on our channel. I'm going to have a cup of tea, and until the next video, thanks for watching, and goodbye.